All right, everybody, this is the How to Hunt Turkey podcast. I'm your host, Dan Johnson, and today I got my good buddy from Vortex Optics, Mr. Erik Barber, on the show. Erik, what's good, my friend?
Dan, I'm counting down the days, man. I am like 10 days away from chasing turkeys here, and I cannot wait.
Are you only doing Wisconsin this year, or how many states are you doing?
I am doing 4 if you count my home state of Wisconsin. So I didn't draw. Wisconsin breaks our season up into periods A through period F. Each letter is associated to a 6-day time period. So I didn't draw an A tag. So I'm going to go to Minnesota, hunt there for the first couple, 2 days of their season. And then actually for a work trip going down to Kentucky to hunt with Harold Knight.
Oh, wow.
Which is I'm super pumped about. That's going to be an incredible experience just in general. And then back home for the majority of the season. And then I'll be in Nebraska for a week with our buddies Nate and Tom Crick from Identical Draw.
Nice, dude. Nice, dude.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be living vicariously through you.
Yeah.
I the last 2 weeks we haven't put an episode out because I've been rehabbing from this knee replacement that I've had, and I just simply asked the doctor or my physical therapist, I'm like, do you think I'm going to be able to get out there and like hunt some turkeys? And he's like, man, because he's a hunter too,
Yeah,
which is in my favor, and he's just like, you're going to be pushing it this weekend for youth season if you get out, but in about 3 weeks, maybe I have a different bit of, a different story.
Yeah.
And I can hunt the end of the season, but I don't know. I'm pretty bummed. And I think once I tell my boy that we're not going to be able to do youth season this year, he's going to be bummed. But outside of that, there might still be some time. So I'm not casting it out altogether.
Yeah, man. Yeah. There's never a great time to do a surgery like that, I guess. But man, that really sucks happening right on the front end of turkey season.
Right. That's a fact. Oh, well, part of it. So you're hunting in 4 different states.
Yep.
How do you prepare for something like that? What's the logistics like?
So for me, the biggest logistics is just ironing out like the travel and my where I'm staying, if I'm camping, if we're getting a hotel, handling all of that stuff out ahead of time, because at this point, like, my gear doesn't really change. I over the years I've messed around with like so many different systems. I've gone for, I used to run a turkey vest, then I went and I ran a chest rig style harness.
Yep.
Which I've ran every year now since 2019. I'm actually switching it up this year. I'm going back to a vest, but a more minimalist style vest. That was always my issue, is I felt vests were just really big and bulky, and there is something that I'm finally going to this year that I'm pretty excited about, that I'm going to try. So my gear doesn't change. I don't run decoys really. Like, I do have like a 2-dimensional Montana, those pop-up Montana decoys. I really like those.
Yep.
But for, 9 out of 10 hunts, that decoy is just going to live in my backpack and never really comes out. So my gear doesn't change. My gun is dialed and ready to go. So at this, stage of the game, being early April when we're recording this, like, most of where my head is at is on like logistics, travel dates, making sure if we're doing an Airbnb that we have it booked, that I have offline maps saved on Onyx, and that I have just like a general idea of like weather. Like, is there any sort of like flexibility of, can I move travel up or back based on good or bad weather? Because, I think if you talk to a lot of turkey hunters, a common theme will be guys would rather have 1 day of great weather than 3 to 5 days of very average or poor weather. So that is something that I would bake in for anybody. Like, if you are kind of planning a turkey trip like that, try to give yourself a little bit of like flexibility. And I know it's tough with like work schedules and kids and, all the things, but if you can give yourself any bit of flexibility, to plan around weather, that is something that is always going to work out in your favor.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this from just experience, turkey seasons are not forgiving, especially like in Iowa. If you hit bad weather on a trip, or it even sounds like these 6-day windows in Wisconsin, you're kind of screwed for the year, man.
Totally. Totally, man. I've had with Iowa specifically, you guys have like I think that first season is what 3 days, 4 days, something like that.
Yeah.
And man, a couple of years ago, I was down hunting down there and ran into like we had snow for the first 2 days, and then we had like rain and wind, and then on the last day it broke. Everyone killed on that last day.
Yeah.
Like it was just like just staying like mentally excited to be there was half the battle, but
Right.
then we knew as soon as we got that weather break it was going to be good, and that was when people started filling their tags.
Yeah. And it's crazy how, like, I don't know about what your experiences are, but there's not a lot of how do I put this? Those days where you wake up, there's not a lot of wind, the
Yep.
sun's coming up, it's going to be crystal clear, right? It's a little crisp as far as
Yep.
the temperature is concerned, and they start rocking in the roost, right? They're
Yep.
just going bananas. There's not a lot of those days
No,
in a turkey season. And
not at
so
all.
even on the years where I didn't kill right away, and it took me, however many days to shoot a turkey, it it's it can get frustrating really fast, especially if you're on like a non-resident hunt.
It can. And that's
Yeah.
where like being flexible with like your hunt style too. Like if it, I'll look at this Nebraska trip, for instance, like, and this is where I talk out of both sides of my mouth, right? Like I preach flexibility, but the 4 days that I have to hunt Nebraska is the 4 days. I'll be
Yep.
there May 10th through the 14th. So like whatever we get during those days is what we're going to deal with. And, that's where I think being able to like, kind of read the room in terms of like turkey behavior, what they're doing, how they're responding to different conditions,
Yeah.
and just being able to like, you're there to hunt, right?
Yeah.
I when I'm on like a quick trip like that, that's bringing food with me, and you're kind of just if you're outside for that whole day, and I know that sometimes like days are long in spring, especially when we're talking like middle of May like that. But man, like if you can just be with birds and like hang with them, eventually, you're gonna hopefully catch like a midday gobble or something, and it just can like be. It's the fact of being there in that moment when they finally
Yeah.
give you something to work with,
Yeah.
and if you get discouraged by bad weather and you're back in the tent or back in camp, whatever, you might miss out on that, and it might just be one or two of those opportunities that you get the whole trip.
Yeah. Is there any weather that you don't hunt in?
I mean, rain is it like a torrential downpour is one that I hate. I just don't.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a baby. I don't love being wet.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say the other one that I don't love is like really windy conditions. That's probably a common theme that you would hear from a lot of folks.
Yeah.
But I have killed some birds in those conditions too, and so that's where it's like I might not look for that in terms of like I might not be super excited to get out of bed that morning, but if it's just a windy day and I'm not dealing with any precip, I'm still gonna at least go and give it a shot.
Yeah.
I feel like I can kind of if you're in an area where you have a fair amount of topography and terrain, I feel like you can kind of read where the birds are going to be. They don't like being up on a ridge top on a big gusty day like that just as much as we don't. So like
Right.
looking for those bottoms, the leeward sides of ridges, all that stuff. And another tip that I'm sure a lot of folks have talked about, but kind of I call it reading the room. Like what are the songbirds doing? Like are
Yeah.
they talking a lot, or are they pretty dormant? Match your calling style to that. Like if it's a windy, gusty day, you're not going to get all the robins chirping and blackbirds sounding off and all the things that you would typically associate with like a beautiful day in the springtime. So, that's where it becomes a little bit more of like a waiting game. Find an area where turkeys have been hanging out, find some scratchings, find some, areas where they've maybe been dusting, and just buy time in that area. I'm not going to like run around and like I might kind of set up and just wait them out a little bit. And when I say wait them out. Like I might not be waiting them out, literally just sitting there all day in one spot, but I might be waiting long enough to hear a gobble somewhere in that proximity, even if it is within 100 yards, and then make a little micro adjustment. But I do think that you can kind of narrow in on those zones a little bit better on days where you have those like adverse conditions.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, man. Sit in extreme wind all day long. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't bother me unless it's like really, really cold, but it's typically not when I go. But something about the rain,
Yeah.
I just don't like it. I don't like being wet, even if it's like maybe just a little sprinkle. Now, um, the first 3 years I was married, I took my wife turkey hunting, and every year it rained and rained and rained, and I tried so hard to get a bird in front of her, and she was just like she gave up. She's like, I was pushing her to her limits, and she hated that, right?
Yeah.
So I had to kind of be careful. But even after that, man, like, dude, I don't do the rain. I'd rather go out in the afternoon and not like pass on a morning and get out there late and try to locate them wherever they're at, as opposed to sit in like shit weather all day.
Totally. I mean, that's something that like, especially, when I used to work at Midwest Whitetail, when we were hunting way more than I am now.
Yeah.
Now I obviously work at Vortex, so I have a Monday through Friday job. So it's harder to get burned out of hunting now.
Mhm.
But back then in those days, I was, 10 years ago now, more than that. When we were hunting all the time, we would always say like, don't overlook a good reset day. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is like sleep in, get
Mhm.
out there at like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, try to catch like a midday bird. And sometimes that little like mental reset of finally getting a good night's sleep, resting up a little bit, if you are hunting a lot, that's something that I would encourage anybody to do, is like, don't feel like you always not need to be there, to hunt them off the roost. For me
Yeah.
anyways, the birds that I kill, very rarely am I killing those birds right off the roost.
Right. Right. Man, for I went on I don't know what do you call it. I was on a roll there for a while. I was killing birds off the roost for like 5 years in a row here in
Yeah.
Iowa, and it was gnarly, dude. It was just like gobble gobble, fly down, couple more gobbles, couple more calls, and boom, dead. Let's go eat
Yeah.
breakfast. So those are fun. Those are fun days. But I love the running and gunning and trying to figure them out. Before we get
Yeah.
into the rest of the podcast, though, I do have to send a huge shout out to a brand that you've already brought up, and that's Montana Decoy. Montana has come out with some pretty kick-ass brand new decoys this year. And the reason that I like them, you've already mentioned it, they're extremely collapsible. So when and if you decide to ever use a decoy, you smash them down. They got this little compression strip, pull it tight. It packs everything down, throw it in your pack, take it out when you need it, undo the compression strap, stick it in the ground, and you're ready to go with it. Some pretty badass decoys. And over the course of, man, I want to say the last 7 years, I've killed a lot of toms coming into like a Jake hen setup.
Yep.
That's my that has been my go-to setup. So go check out montanadecoy.com and check out their entire lineup of turkey and all species hunting species. I mean, you can't hunt a cow, but they even have a cow decoy too. So go check that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, man. Those are a game changer. I can personally vouch for them.
There you go. There you go. All right. So how does your strategy change? Like, you're going to Nebraska, and obviously Nebraska's terrain is different than Wisconsin's terrain. But I'll ask you kind of a vague question here. How do you change your hunting strategy, your turkey hunting strategy, like early April versus mid-May? And
Yeah.
it's warmer. It could be a variety of different terrain changes, including more vegetation on the landscape. How does that play a factor in your strategy?
Yeah. I am much more calculated with my movements early than I am late.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is the woods are just so much more open.
Yeah.
When I get into like my favorite time of the year to hunt is that like May 5th through the 15th ish window, like, that like end of the first week of May throughout the second full week.
Yeah.
And the reason I like that week so much is the weather is usually pretty dang good. The hens are starting to go to nest, and the toms are still active enough, like pursuing it, the breeding season more than they are like it. You get towards like the end of May, and I always call it like you get that summer vibe a little bit, where like
Yeah.
you might catch a tom in a field, and like you might call at him and he might not even pop strut, might not give you a gobble. Like that's I call like a summertime bird that you're just
Yeah.
not going to kill. You don't really get that in that like early May window. So yeah, back to strategy. I'm much more calculated with my movements early because the woods are just so open.
Mm-hmm.
Now this year might be a little bit different because even here in Wisconsin, where we had a blizzard like 10 days ago, 15 days ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you
but
guys get a ton of snow up there?
we did. We got
Yeah.
9 inches, but it melted like that. So like even with snow lingering, we've had really warm weather, and we've had this like roller coaster temperature thing.
Yeah.
So the woods are greening up. I mean, right now, the date we're recording this is April 6th, and our season opens, I think, on the 16th. Right now feels like it should be opening day, just purely based on like looking at what the woods looks like.
Yeah.
Your maple trees are starting to bud out. Any of like the buckthorn, like the more invasive species type stuff, like that's definitely like approaching leaf out right now.
Yep.
So it will be interesting this year to see like what that cover looks like, in that like mid to late April standpoint, even up as far north as Wisconsin. For our Kentucky trip, we're going to be there April 20th through the 24th. And I just looked at the forecast right before we jumped on, and they've got temperatures in the 80s.
Yeah.
Basically like all week this week and into next week. And I know they were already pretty ahead. So like I think we'll be
In the thick stuff.
yeah, I think it's going to be full leaf out down there. It's going to be, prime green up, which again, I do like for the ability of being able to like sneak and kind of make those micro adjustments on a bird. And it comes with its own challenges then too, right? Is like you're not seeing as far. I think a lot of people underestimate what leaf cover does to dampening noise.
Mm-hmm.
So like I know when I was really starting to get into turkey hunting, I always anticipated gobbles as further away than they actually were, especially like later in the season when the full leaf out was happening, and I was just flat out running over birds all the time.
Yeah.
And that was because like I just thought they were maybe 300 yards away. Well, they were actually 100 yards away, and all of that dense vegetation just knocked that sound down so much. And then when I made that last move, boom, you end up, smacking into each other, and you blow that turkey up, and now you got to go find another one.
Yeah.
I'll
tell you
less
this.
is more, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. So here I had a really active tom one year, and I had him active before green up. It was season 1 in Iowa. It was a late bloom or later bloom, so the woods were wide open, right? And I don't know if you want to call it a lesson learned, but it was a definite observation where he was henned up on one ridge, and I was on the next ridge over. I could see him strutting up and down, but just the direction he gobbles. If he's gobbling in my face and towards me, he sounds so much closer. He turns around and he's gobbling the other direction, and he sounds like he's another 200, 300 yards away. So it can be extremely difficult. And then you add in wind, you add in vegetation to try to, I don't know, it's something that I'm not good at, but it takes just a ton of years of experience knowing where these turkeys are at. And then if they do gobble, then say, okay, how far away is he? Because the wind's in my face or the wind's to my back. That can play a role. Vegetation plays a role, and it could be wind, could be rain, could be 100 different things, and
Totally.
you're running over them, like you said.
I mean, you hit on a really good one there, wind direction. Like that is something that I think a lot of people overlook.
Mm-hmm.
but like, what way is that wind going from the turkey to you? Is it vice versa? That is going to make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And like a really cool thing that we did back in back when I worked at Midwest Whitetail, we had a show called Cabela's Spring Thunder that Warb hosted, and he did this thing where like we got on opposite ridges. We were maybe like 150 yards away with a valley in between us. And he got up on that opposite ridge, faced us, and then he hit his slate call as hard as he could with that slate call facing right at us. Then he turned away and did the same thing, casting that sound back out behind. And it was unbelievable the difference of that slate call. And a slate call is going to be way louder,
Yeah.
or like any pot call, you can really like overemphasize the volume on that.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty telling, like test, quote unquote. And then the other thing is like, what is that terrain doing? Like, is there dips and valleys in it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just straight flat terrain? Is the bird above you, below you? Like, what are all these things that are kind of working out? If a bird is above you, I always feel that they're generally louder than if they're below you.
Oh yeah.
And the reason there is like it's just casting out into wide open nothingness, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that tree cover up above, obviously
Yep.
that hill's dropping off, versus if that sound is competing coming up a gully or up a valley, and all this understory to get to you, and you're maybe 500 800 feet above it, like that sound takes a lot of stuff that it's got to get through to get to you. So I would always index on, that bird might be a little bit closer than it sounds.
So how have you learned how to close the gap in those scenarios where we threw out there a whole bunch of different scenarios about
Yeah.
when a tom is responding to your calls, and maybe he's not coming in, or you don't know if he's coming in, because
Yeah.
maybe his first gobble's away and his second gobble's towards, and you're like, okay, well, he's coming my way, but he's not coming your way.
Yeah.
He's staying still. So what have you learned to get yourself throughout these scenarios closer to them?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is like if I can get that bird to shock gobble on anything other than a turkey call, that is
Yeah.
always preferred. And I know that that's probably such a like basic tip, but it is something that like I catch myself. It's the easy button to just pull out I have a go-to slate call that I think sounds really good. I can cut on it really loud and I can cover a lot of ground. So that's the easy button for me to do that. But if I can get a bird to respond to like an owl hoot, a crow call, something like that, I would much rather that, because then I can keep that bird gobbling, close my distance, and then I'm really calculated on when I make that first call to him. Like I might sit there for like 5 minutes in a little like 15 by 15 yard radius of like looking at trees, looking at potential setups, and trying to figure out where I want that first sound to come from. Because a lot of times, especially once you know, get inside their bubble, they will come to that first place that you call to them from. So like I will intentionally find like a open spot on a ridge right before I make that final setup, and that's where I'll call from, and then I'll scurry back 20 yards, get into my setup, and then I'm anticipating that bird coming to that initial place that I called from. Now on the flip side, not every bird is going to respond to a crow call or an owl hoot.
Right.
So if you do strike that bird on your slate call, like if let's just lay out a scenario. It's early May and you're just covering a bunch of ground. It's about 10:30 in the morning. And you're just cruising ridge tops. Maybe every 150, 200 yards, you're stopping, and maybe you start with a quick little 3-note yelp sequence, and then you stop, and then you ramp it up a little bit faster, and then you cut, and then yelp, 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 and now you stop, and then boom, that's when that bird gobbles. Like you got him to kind of shot gobble off your slate call.
Right.
So what I'm going to do now is like I'm going to gauge, one, how far was that gobble? Was it far? Was it close? Whatever. What's the cover like? All that different stuff. And then what was the temperature of that gobble? Like, did he cut me off? Or did I have to wait a couple seconds before he finally then answered my call?
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is going to dictate a lot. So if he cut me off right away, even if he is maybe 250, 300 yards away, I might not push a whole lot further. I might just
Okay.
kind of set up there because I can always move further later on.
Yeah.
But if he was maybe kind of cool and gobbled, give it a 5 or a 10 count after I hit my slate call, I might go to make a move on that bird. But whenever I make that move, whether I adjust and set up right there or I, try to close that gap, the next time I call is going to be pretty calculated on giving him maybe like 5 to 10 minutes to either close that distance or equally as valuable, stay right where he is. And then the next time he gives out his location, that's now kind of when the games begin, right? Like if he's all of a sudden half that distance, I'm going to just say set up.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't close any gap and he gobbles again, now still at 300 yards, I'm not going to answer him. I'm probably going to slip off on some sort of terrain feature to try to get around and cut that distance at least in half. And then knowing that he's there, like I've got the confidence, hey, this bird is up on this oak flat, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to try to cut 150 yards off. And now I'm going to try to get him to shot gobble on something like a crow call or an owl hoot, but I
Okay.
don't want to overdo it to the point that he gets a little spooky on that.
Yeah.
So if he answers that like a shock, awesome. Now I'm going to set up. If not, then I will switch to my slate and try to get him to go again. And if he does, that's going to be my setup. If he doesn't, I'm still probably going to set up there and just assume, hey, I'm around this bird. I need him. Now I'm kind of working on his terms. So I'm going to just sit here. I'm going to just listen. I'm going to listen for walking in the leaves. I'm going to listen for drumming. All the sounds that aren't the obvious, like gobble, like type
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah. And you've kind of you've walked us up to a point where it gets really good or it gets really bad, right?
Yep.
Because you've walked us up into the point where the Tom shows up and you put a load in his face, or he continues to call and respond, but he's not gaining any ground. What do you do in that scenario where he's not coming in then?
That's when I'm going to go to him.
How hard?
I've gotten more aggressive with it over the years. More when I've been timid on this is when it's bitten me. Like that's when I end up like, and by timid, what I mean is like, oh, maybe I'll only go up another 20, 30 yards. Like as long as that bird is gobbling and you know that he cannot see you, like you are out of sight. And if you can control how loud or how quiet you're walking, I'm going to get as close to that bird as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might mean, I can think back to a hunt in some big hill country a couple of years ago. I had this bird gobbling on this piece of, he was on a private piece that came up next to this public chunk that I was hunting. And I actually heard him from my truck, but he was a ways off. I cut that distance in half. I set up, I called at him. He gobbled back a bunch, and I ended up setting up. 20 minutes of that bird just gobbling over and over in that exact same spot went by. And finally, I'm like, you know what? I'm done calling at him. I'm going to start moving in. He's clearly communicating his location. So as long as I can know where he's at, I'm going to just get up to him. Right. Long story short, I got to probably 45, 50 yards of that bird as he was gobbling still. And I'm still like making my final move just because the terrain was so steep that I knew he flat out couldn't see me. Mm-hmm. And I finally got set up probably about 40 yards from this bird and threw in my diaphragm call, hit a couple like very light yelps and just started scratching in the leaves like hard, like hard, and like made it definitely sound like there were a couple birds in there like scratching or even, just kind of like squabbling or like fighting or something like that. And that Tom just didn't even answer to that. All of a sudden I just heard you just coming through the leaves, and he popped up at 20 yards, and it was a dead turkey. Yeah. Now, if I would have been more conservative and just like waited, which I've done a bunch of times, I feel like those are the birds that you just hear gobble 100 times, 500 times, and they just frustrate you, and you maybe catch a glimpse of them through the timber at 100 yards, but he's never going He's never going to be where you are because he is where he wants to be.
Right. Right. Now, that's a great scenario for like big woods, timber, ag, even ag country. Now
Yeah.
you're going out to Nebraska this year, and there's that completely wide open terrain out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you see the birds from wherever, maybe like a hilltop. You can see them already roosted in the creek or river bottom, and they got to come up or in some pasture and things like that. How are you hunting wide open birds?
Yeah, it is. It is a lot different. In terms of like what's different is your ability to see.
Yeah.
So, that's where I'm gonna like if you can get them roosted, if you can glass them up, if you can get eyes on them, that's always gonna be the best because when you hear a tom gobble, everyone just like at least myself, I automatically think, oh, that's a lone tom. But if you can understand the flock dynamic, that is going to help you so much once you get in and set up on that bird. And that's where in a place like in this open country where you can use your, and I'm not saying this just because I work at an optics company, but you can use your optics to your advantage and really understand, okay, I've got, in this situation, I've got a tom and a 3-pack of jakes and 2 hens.
Yeah.
And the tom is the one that's gobbling, but he's acting, maybe a little bit submissive towards that 3-pack of jakes, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm going to take note of that. And that's going to affect how I set up on that bird. Obviously, I'm not going to put on a jake decoy if I'm observing him acting such a way, around that flock. But it really does all kind of boil down to then getting close to him.
Yeah.
So we're hunting in Nebraska. There is a little bit of like some rolling terrain, even though it is still like pretty open. That's where I would try to get some sort of like hill or some sort of barrier in between me and that bird, cut some distance off, and at least get in the game with them because a
Yeah.
lot of times in that open stuff, the default answer is, hey, let's put out a really high vis decoy, a strutter, and a breeding hen, and just wait until that bird gets eyes on that setup and comes in.
Yeah.
That might work sometimes, but that is, again, back to flock dynamic. That's a certain bird that's going to respond in that situation. Not all toms are wired to when they see a strutter with a breeding hen, they're going to run in and try to flog that thing.
Right.
So if you can, in open country, if you can get some visibility and understand how the birds are interacting, that's always going to help stack the odds in your favor.
Yeah. So in wide open country, there's not a lot of cover, obviously, and you can't just belly crawl 500 yards. I mean, you might be able to, but but you're going to possibly be seen getting to them. At what point in a scenario like that are you trying to use a blind or maybe water access to get closer to them? Like, does it change your starting point throughout the day while they're still in the tree?
Well, he's in the tree. Yes. What I would do in a lot of times, like, I mean, let's say I've roosted that bird the night before and I know where he's at.
Yeah.
That's a situation where the next morning it's going to be like a 0 dark 30 wake up call, and I am going to get in there as close as I can, whether that's like through a creek access. I would always use some sort of like depression to get close.
Yeah.
But if that's not an option, I'm just going to get there super, super early before the woods wake up, and I'm going to get as close as I can, as quietly as I can, and set up. Now, on the flip side, if I didn't see that bird roost and I just went in blind that morning, let's say I went to a new piece of public, and sunrise this morning was 6:30, so let's call it 5:45, and I'm hearing birds gobbling. It's 15 minutes before shooting light, and I know, okay, there's birds roosted here. I might not know exactly what that topography looks like. That's a situation where don't overlook the importance of just like letting that bird fly down, do his thing, and just kind of hang with him, right? You might actually just want to be in that bird's like vicinity, even if it is 200 to 300 yards, and you're not actually like in the game with him.
Yeah.
But you wait until finally he does something that puts himself in a vulnerable position, right? So, okay, let's say that bird pitches down, you watch him 300 yards away, he's got some hens, and eventually those hens start like going into a pasture, they go to nest or whatever, and that Tom gets separated from his hens, that's when I'm going to be like, okay, I need to get to that bird right now because
Yeah.
he just lost his hens. He's vulnerable. Or, on the flip side, let's say he goes with his hens and he just goes up and over a ridge. Well, now it's an all out, sprint to get to right on that offside of that ridge that he just crested over. And now I'm going to set up there and hopefully just pull him right back over. So like, if I was going to just summarize that, it's like, watch the bird, figure out what they do. When he gives you your opportunity, take it, but don't force it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the hardest thing that I've had to learn, right? I cut my teeth on river bottom, public land, birds that other guys were trying to hunt too. So usually the first guy who would get to them is the first, you'd shoot them. And
Yeah.
so, but I've also just completely destroyed, slam dunks. You know what I mean? In my day too, where I got way too aggressive, tried to get, really close.
Man, one of my favorite hunts I ever did was in Iowa. I didn't even have the tag. I was filming. Warb was hunting. But we floated a canoe in. And we were like in this little like channel of water. And you had like 8-foot banks on both sides. And you're like in this picture a trench,
Yep.
and you're just slipping through dead quiet in that canoe. And I mean, we hunted probably until like noon or 1 o'clock that day and did like a big float. And there were so many times where we had birds gobbling like just up on the lip, or you could hear birds drumming right like within like just a couple 20, 30 yards of like where we were in the water, and they had no idea we were there.
Yeah.
And it's just a fun way to hunt them, like that's something that like, it's funny you mentioned that because I've literally been looking for areas, like just scouting onyx. I'm like, where's an area I can hunt out of a kayak? Cause I just want to do it.
Dude, I got one for you.
Okay.
Let's next time you plan on hunting Iowa, let me know. I got a strip of river that surrounded on both sides. And you would have to float down, I don't know, maybe a mile. Before you get into the public from a bridge crossing.
Totally.
And then it's all public on both sides. And the crazy thing about it is all of the hunters have to access it from the outside.
Sure.
So they're coming in and you're already in. So maybe we make a plan or something like that.
I love it, man. We should totally do that. It'd be a ton of fun.
Hell yeah, man. Well, I tell you what, man, great conversation today. I'm going to keep this one short as my knee is starting to flare up again, but I want to talk to you again in May after you've hunted a couple,
okay.
Maybe even before or after your Nebraska hunt. But, man, I really appreciate the insight that you, dumped on us today, man. Thank you very much for your time and good luck. Hopefully you, shoot a quadruple beard Tom.
I hope so, man. And I hope that Neil heals up fast, Dan. I'm pulling for you.
I know, because dude, at some point this summer we gotta do high point.
We were just talking about it. I literally told Graham yesterday, I'm like, we got to get up here and get Dan up here to do a high point dinner. Count on it. Absolutely.
Amen. All right. Hey, have a good one. Do me a favor, everybody. If you like what you're hearing here on the How to Hunt Turkey podcast, go to iTunes or Spotify, wherever you download this podcast. Give us a 5-star rating. That helps us get out to more people. Also, the How to Hunt Turkey podcast is on YouTube as well. So go subscribe to that channel. I'd really appreciate it. Good vibes, everybody, and good luck.